So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for Sandro for the opportunity to share our views. So share our views on what are the key forces that are driving the automotive revolution. I've been in automotive more than 25 years now, and it's never been a more exciting time to be in automotive than it is today. So my name is Joseph Notaro. I'm responsible for automotive strategy worldwide and business development at On Semiconductor. On Semiconductor may be new to most of you, even though we've been around since 1999, but we're a completely different company than we were 15, 20 years ago. We were spun off from Motorola in 1999 as a pure commodity supplier. We've evolved through organic growth and through acquisitions, becoming really a strong player in automotive, industrial, and communications infrastructure. Just to give you some size, we were 1.2 billion in 1999. We're almost 6 billion today, 10 billion in market cap. We shipped more than 75 billion units last year in 2018. That's more than 10 units for every person on the planet today. In automotive, we shipped 20 billion units. That's more than 200 units per each vehicle that was produced last year. We focused on automotive, autonomous driving, vehicle electrification. We're number one in image sensors for automotive with more than 60% market share, 80% in ADAS. We're number two overall in power devices on the market, and we're number one in LED front lighting and ignition IGBTs. We have parts that you could put in a salt shaker, and we have parts that are that big. So really one of the largest portfolios on the market. But when we look at the mega trends and where we're focusing and how these align to the mega trends, and some of these concepts you already heard in the previous speeches this morning and yesterday, but obviously autonomous vehicles is one of the largest mega trends we've spoken about. We spoke about safety, efficiency, how we include mobility to more people, and how we're creating new business models with shared services, shared mobility service, or even going beyond the vehicle. And most of the technologies are sensors, GPS, 3D mapping, and the processing of information. And like we heard this morning from Johannes, many of these technology megatrends, they're linked to each other. You're going to have one that's going to be driving the other and vice versa. But when we talk about connected vehicles, obviously we're talking about improved infrastructure, the possibility to have new modalities over the air, programming, flashing of vehicles, some challenges, privacy, cybersecurity. Vehicle electrification is interesting, even what Johannes showed this morning. And we confirmed that while vehicle electrification and autonomous vehicles are two separate megatrends, we firmly believe that when we talk about L4, L5 vehicles, this will be linked also to the deployment of electrified powertrains. And this is all about improved fuel economy, reduced emissions, and it's mostly on power devices. And last but not least are the new shared mobility services and new mobility services. So shared vehicles, it means increased productivity, reduced time looking for parking, like Philippe was mentioning earlier, but also new revenue streams and new business models that are out there. So when we talk about vehicle electrification, and like Dr. Castle was mentioning yesterday, it's not a matter if there's global warming, there is global warming, we have an impact. We could reduce the impact to our environment by reducing emissions in vehicles. When we talk about electrical vehicles, the three key points are the battery, the charging, and the power delivery to the inverter. Most of these technologies are based on power devices. It could be a diode, MOSFET, IGBT, discrete, packaged, power module, silicon carbide, wide bandgap. But on the other side, while we want to reduce the impact to our environment, there's impact to the people. And more than 1.3 million people die each year on the road. We heard the statistic already from Philippe earlier. And there's between 20 and 50 million road traffic fatalities a year worldwide. The other key statistic that is really eye-opening When we look at the top 10 causes of death among people 15 and 29, 15 and 29, these are future leaders. These are the people that will be leading our companies, leading our countries. These are future leaders. The number one cause of death is road traffic fatality. It's more than AIDS, more than suicide, more than homicide. And the sad part is that 94% of accidents are due to human error. So these can be eliminated easily. Just with simple ADAS systems, about 28% of accidents can be prevented. We're a major supplier for image sensors, and with our market share of more than 80% on ADAS systems for image sensors, we're actually saving 8 lives per hour. By the time I'm done with this speech, we would have been able to save 2 to 3 lives already. So we have an ethical duty to do something, and we can do this. So why is autonomous driving important? It's a growing market. We expect level 4, and I put this in red because it's hard to say, we'll talk about level 4 vehicles. We should be changing our mentality and talk about level 4 functionalities. But let's say there'll be some deployments by 2021. Obviously, we have to find a way to fund it, create infrastructures, and also how to regulate it. It's good. We talk about inclusion. We talk about access. Here's an example of Steve Mann. He's blind, but he's basically riding along in a Google self-driving car. He would not have that possibility to be independent. He would also have to rely on some other driver to do that. So there's societal benefits and there's safety benefits. We talk about reducing traffic accidents. It's complicated. Many people spoke about that already yesterday. Complications of how do you validate, how you verify the system, how do you make use of all the data that's available in the vehicle. But you can improve traffic flows, you can reduce traffic parking demands, and you can create new services. So that's what's very interesting for a semiconductor supplier like ourselves. So the key pillars of the car of the future, we spoke about the sensors. We'll go a little bit more in detail there. Obviously, you have data. How do you fuse this data? How do you get information from this data that makes sense? AI is driving, really making the decisions, on analyzing this data, extracting information, making the decisions. System challenges are cybersecurity, functional safety, and electrification we spoke about earlier. When we look at the SAE automation classification, the levels, we have the two distinctions. You have the blue and the green. Blue is basically the driver is always in control of the vehicle. There are functions that are helping the driver, but the driver is always in control, while the green is the vehicle which is operating itself, whether there's a driver or not in the vehicle. Difference between 3, 4, and 5 is really what is the fail-safe condition. Level 3, if there's a fault, something happens, the driver is expected to take over control of the vehicle. 4 and 5, there's different fail-safe conditions, what you expect the vehicle to do. It will be independent of the driver. Today, we think of level 2, 3, 4, 5 as a roadmap. So I have a level 2 car today, my next car will be level 3, next car will be level 4, next car will be level 5. I think we have to move away from this paradigm and really start talking about use cases and applications in controlled environments. Because I don't believe, and I agree with Luca yesterday, we'll be able to afford a level 4, level 5 car as a user. But there'll be level 4 capabilities that I could be using. So maybe in a controlled environment, my car today, I'll normally drive it as usual, have some ADAS functions, but maybe we'll have some functions like highway entry, highway exit, automated, or just some specific lane overtaking in a highway that in a controlled environment, it could act as a level 4 vehicle. So I see today that we are in this area here. I see many car makers talking now level 2 plus, level 2.5, where they're offering features that could be classified as level 4 as a co-pilot, helping the driver. Personally, I don't believe in level 3. I don't believe that we can depend on a driver, a human being, who's distracted doing something else to take over control of a vehicle immediately. But there's some business use cases like robo-taxis, where it will be reduced fleets, but where robo-taxis has a business model behind it. That could really push deployment to level 4 and level 5 on the roads. So these are some timings, expected timings, and you can see some of the compared to the predictions in 16, 17, and 18, there's been some delays, but this is what the expected deployment of autonomous driving vehicles is. Now, what does deployment mean? Deployment could be hundreds of vehicles on the road. We're not talking about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of vehicles. But I would expect really the car sharing market to be the ones really deploying it in robo-taxi first. And the other, let's say, challenge that we have with the deployment of these vehicles, technology is there, we could do that today. But the deployment is really the user confidence, and how do you create more confidence in the user that these are really safe vehicles. So it's just some examples, because we talk about vehicles and we think of the car we're driving, and we're thinking about, okay, can I go to my next car? It could be a fully autonomous driving. Well, let's look at Amazon Prime. Let's look at delivery of medication to your house. Let's look at autonomous driving in a controlled environment like a campus, or automated parking in a parking garage. These are all level 4, level 5 type of applications. They're all doing the same thing. They all have the same challenges. They need sensing, they need to fuse, they need to map the environment, they need to know what's going on, but they're doing it in a controlled environments. And we could also put here pictures of drones. So a device that doesn't have wheels, but is still doing an automated function. So all these type of functionalities are creating new business models and new revenue streams based on the same technology. So even in our minds, we're not thinking anymore about the car that I use to go shopping every day, but we're creating revenues and business streams that go beyond the personal use of a vehicle. In a level 4 type vehicle, expected to be more than 40 sensors. That's radar, LiDAR, image sensors, ultrasonic sensors, sensors inside the vehicle, outside the vehicle. You need to monitor what happens inside. You need to monitor the driver. You need to monitor the occupants. It could be an image sensor inside. It could be time of flight. It could be a radar as well, inside and outside. So it's a plethora of sensors that go beyond just the single looking forward, looking behind the vehicle. Obviously, we're working hard to maximize the performance of these sensors. And if you look at the image sensor, one of the key elements is high dynamic range. How do you detect the details in the brightest of this image and in the darkest of the image? If you look at one of our new image sensors compared to the competition, in this image here, you don't know what's behind it at the end of the tunnel. You don't even know this tunnel when it ends. Does it end here? Does it end there? When you have 140 dB of dynamic range, look at the difference you have there. So definitely there's significant innovation going on the sensor side. Same thing with radar and LiDAR, making it more precise, higher performing, and cheaper. But on the other side, not one sensor could do all the jobs. We can debate hours on this chart. I don't want to go through it, but each sensor has its own pros and its own cons. Image sensors are good at identifying objects. Radar is good at finding an object, detecting an object. LiDAR is good for other functionalities. They have complementary features. If we use the best of the best, we can really maximize the compute and power efficiencies. We could combine strengths, and we could provide redundancies, because redundancies are important. And if you look at this picture here, this is a real case with one of our customers. And this is a truck in the US, one of the big trailer trucks. It's a very shiny back. The image sensor sees everything. But you can make the wrong decision. That's not a car coming against me, it's a truck in front of me. So we need to really use the strengths of each sensor, even though each sensor is being maximized to its performance. But we spoke about component challenge is when we look at the system level, cybersecurity is the #1 concern for self-driving cars today, according to surveys. And Mark Rosekind from NHTSA, who was saying hackers, terrorists, next target is in your garage. And ASIL is really important to address system and component errors. So let's talk about one side of functional safety. Functional safety is understanding in a system, being able to detect the fault, being able to react to the fault, and being able to define a safe time. So there's different times involved. You want this time to be as short as possible. But you can't do that alone. It's really system decisions that have to be made. So that's where you're going to go from centralized versus distributed intelligence. Like Bruno was mentioning yesterday, intelligence flows downhill. So we need to understand how we can make these sensors more intelligent to provide the redundancies. Philippe was talking about GPS mapping, connectivity. It's really putting all together to create a fail-safe system. But when we look at cybersecurity, can a sensor be hacked? And we've been working with independent auditors to really monitor and audit our sensors systems with our customers. And this is a real example that was done. And you see there's various points that you could hack into a system. It could be on the optical side. You could put some adhesives, some external signs. You could also hack electronically. But you could have an image here. You could superimpose an image. My processor doesn't know. Now my processor says, OK, there's nothing in front of me. And we hack the system. So there's a cybersecurity standard that's being deployed, ISO 21434. This is going to be deployed by the end of 2019. But overall, the leading semiconductor suppliers are not waiting. We are already proposing solutions on the market today. Those are available because we cannot wait because it's so important. We want to be ready for the OEMs to be able to address these concerns because the cybersecurity is one of the biggest concerns on the market. Last but not least, legislation. Even Dr. Gasso was mentioning yesterday, how do we validate, verify these systems? We talked about, from Wally, billions of hours of testing would be required. What is the legal framework? Who's responsible for norms? Who's responsible for standards? We look at the US, NHTSA, federal, they were usually responsible for validating systems, for validating vehicles, saying this car is safe, this car is not safe. While the states are usually responsible for validating the operator. They are responsible for giving you your driving license. So now in a level 4, level 5, who's the operator? Who's liable? And if you look at the United States, but we could have the same map for Europe, the same map of Australia. Each state is coming up with its own legislation, with its own norms, with its own requirements. And if you look at an OEM, from an OEM point of view, it's a nightmare to understand, what do I do? We have the same thing in Europe, same thing in Australia. The only region is China, where you have a strong government, central government, where they could really have one set of norms and deploy them. So here's a call to action that we have to probably work at in all the regions, understand how can we really come up with one set of norms so it makes it easier for deployment of these vehicles. So to conclude, we said the industry is going through a disruptive change. It's exciting to be in automotive, but you really need cooperation amongst automotive companies, technology companies, universities, governments to enable safe, secure, and timely deployment of autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, and electrical vehicles. And semiconductors are at the core of this innovation. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'll be available during the break. So thank you very much.